Welcome to another edition of the News Review. In this edition, Israel has carried out a new airstrike on Syria, targeting the capital Damascus with missiles. The attack left 5 people, including a soldier, dead and 15 civilians wounded. The Syrian army says Israel targeted several residential buildings, but most of the missiles were intercepted by the air defense. Iran has condemned the attack. Foreign Ministry spokesman Nasser Kanani slammed what he called the West's shameful silence over repeated violations of Syria's sovereignty. He called on international organizations, especially the UN Security Council, to take immediate action. Kanani said the subsequent Israeli and Daesh attacks on Saturday and early Sunday show the natural and inherent bond of the two terrorist entities. He said that comes at a time when Syria is reeling from the recent devastating earthquake. Palestinian resistance groups have also condemned the Israeli attack. To discuss that further, we're joined by our correspondent in Damascus, Muhammad Ali. Also, we have with us Marcus Papadopoulos, historian, political analyst, and author, joining us from London. Thank you very much to both of you, gentlemen. Let's begin with our correspondent, Muhammad Ali, who, if I'm not mistaken, is right there at the scene. Tell us where you are. We can see people behind you working on the debris.
Now in one of the main quarters by the last night residential building, large hole created by missile that landed at residential. Now, this news coming out from Damascus, the foreign ministry said that this Israeli attack, systematic actions that Israel carries out in Syria, whether apartments, airports, or even ports. The foreign ministry also said that such aggressions against Syrians is a clear threat to international and requires urgent international steps. Aggressions. The foreign ministry statement by that Syria expects the Council and to condemn Israeli attacks and take the necessary measures to punish the perpetrators, the Israeli. Now, what we know for now is that 5 so far people have been killed, only 1 military personnel, and 15 others injured as a result of this Israeli attack that hit various parts of the Syrian capital, Damascus. And as you can see behind me, it's a residential quarter, it's a residential building, and those who have been killed are civilians.
Exactly. So, Marcus Papadopoulos, it is not the first time, obviously it won't be the last, but still the UN keeps silent and Israel continues attacks on the civilian areas, residential areas, not to mention that even military targets would not be justified.
Well, at a time when Syria is reeling in the aftermath of the devastating earthquake that struck the country, in which thousands of Syrian men, women and children were killed, Syria and the Syrian people have been subjected to a military attack from one of its neighbours, namely Israel. The Israeli act of aggression against Syria was not just blood-curdling, but it also reveals again the brutal nature of the Israeli ruling elite. Because to kick a people when they are on their knees is utterly reprehensible and utterly unforgivable. But there is another angle to this matter. The West, every day of the week, is castigating Russia over its military campaign in Ukraine, arguing that the Kremlin has violated international law. Yet, in relation to Israel's ongoing attacks, military attacks against both Syria and Lebanon, the West has not only not condemned Israel's acts of aggression, but it has also condoned them by arguing that Israel has a right to self-defense. which leads me on to a point which I wish viewers of this interview to reflect on. The West argues, as I said moments ago, that Israel is allowed to take military action against both Syria and Lebanon out of self-defense. Well, can that argument of self-defense not be applied to the Russian military campaign in Ukraine? Because the Kremlin has argued that one of the reasons as to why it commenced the military campaign in Ukraine was out of self-defense vis-a-vis the growing NATO menace in Ukraine. So again, if Israel has a right to militarily attack Syria and Lebanon on the basis of self-defense, then can that argument of self-defense be applied to Russia's campaign in Ukraine?
That is a very interesting point that you raised there, Mr. Papadopoulos. So, Mohammad Ali, are there any reactions there regarding the attack that recently happened?
Yes, the first reaction was from the Foreign Ministry, the one that I just mentioned, the statement that came out, that there should be some kind of steps taken by the United Nations to end such Israeli aggressions, which are threatening peace and security, regional and international peace and security. But I believe the most important reactions are from the people, from the civilians in that area, in this area over here where I am standing in Kafar Souseh, those who were sleeping inside their apartments at 12:20 a.m. local time and woke up fearing, not knowing or realizing yet what is happening. Is it an earthquake? Is it an airstrike by an enemy? Is it a terrorist, a car bomb explosion? They woke up in fear, and what happened was, unfortunately, that it turned out to be this Israeli aggression, which killed a number of civilians. So it is the reaction, I believe, civilian to overhear the residents of this particular building, which was directly hit, who of course called also on the entire world to do something and stop Israel from carrying out such attacks, to do something and help Syrians get out of their crisis, to do something and force the US and its Western allies to end sanctions on them and this economic siege also on this country. They have been suffering from so many issues, the Syrian people, throughout those years. And despite the fact that there has been this massive earthquake just about 10 days ago, no one cares from the international community, speaking, of course, in particular about the US and its Western allies, and of course, Israel, which just attacked Syria, attacked residential areas. It's not a surprise, definitely. But this time the attack happened in a very crowded area, civilian area, residential area in the Syrian capital, Damascus, and it was a shock for the residents here.
Thank you, Mr. Papadopoulos. Can we expect any kind of serious reaction from the UN, at least let's see a resolution or something, or should we totally just cut the UN out of this whole equation?
Of course, there will be no reaction from the United Nations Security Council. Why? Because if the matter was to be referred to the Security Council, then America and Britain, and very possibly France, would simply scupper any chance of the matter being discussed. Israel is America's main conduit for influence and power in the Middle East. Israel is America's eyes and ears in the Middle East. Without Israel, it is very difficult to see how America would not only have managed to achieve mastery over the Middle East, but also how it would be able to preserve that mastery over the Middle East. And also we need to reflect on how the West cares nothing for international law. It cares nothing for the United Nations Charter. Its only interest in international law lies with the fact that international law is at the heart of the illusion that the West has constructed about itself and which it presents to the rest of the world, namely that the West is the defender and guardian of international law. The reality, of course, is that the West is the preeminent violator of international law. And on top of that, is the most criminal and the most murderous violator of international law. But again, the West's only interest in international law is maintaining the facade that it is the defender of international law. Anyone with an ounce of common sense and an ounce of knowledge of history and international relations knows that America, alongside its allies in the world, principally Britain, has invaded, has bombed, has carried out coups in more countries than any other country in all four corners of the world. That is the reality about the West vis-a-vis international law.
Thank you very much, Marcus Papadopoulos, political analyst and author from London, and our correspondent, Muhammad Ali, live from Damascus. Thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us on this edition of the News Review.